Today, we are taking an incredible journey into the heart of the 2021 global cryptomania. We're focusing on one founder, one catastrophic collapse, and, well, a prison sentence so extraordinary it sounds like a number pulled from a science fiction novel.
It really does.
Our mission today is to unpack the entire story of Faruk Fatih Özer, the young founder of the Turkish cryptocurrency exchange Thodex, and the huge regulatory transformation that followed his alleged escape.
This is the story of a digital celebrity who, according to investigators, emptied an entire financial empire onto a single thumb drive.
And it is, you could argue, the most dramatic cautionary tale in the history of centralized crypto exchanges.
Oh, absolutely. What we're analyzing here is one of the biggest alleged crypto heists in history.
Yeah.
And it unfolded with breathtaking speed in April 2021.
And when it's all over, the platform was dark. The financial lives of nearly 400,000 active traders were just thrown into absolute chaos.
And that number, 400,000, is key. We have to talk about the sheer scale here.
Right. The initial media estimates for the locked funds were just astonishing. They were ranging wildly from a staggering $2 billion up to an almost unbelievable $10 billion US.
I mean, the impact on 391,000 users.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to remember the context. This is in a country, Turkey, that was already fighting severe economic instability.
Exactly. This wasn't just a loss of, speculative fund money for a lot of people. For many, this was supposed to be a safe harbor against inflation.
Precisely. And what makes the Thodex incident so iconic and so useful as a case study for us is that defining image. It's simultaneously so high-tech and incredibly low-tech.
The thumb drive.
The thumb drive. You have Özer, just 27 years old at the time, allegedly fleeing Istanbul, heading to Tirana, Albania, with a simple piece of hardware in his hand, a flash drive rumored to contain the entire digital vault.
The private keys to the exchange's cold wallet, potentially holding $2 billion US in customer crypto assets.
Think about that. The single point of failure, the keys to the entire bank vault holding nearly 400,000 users' money, was physically portable.
Allegedly carried across international borders by the CEO himself.
That image just cuts right to the absolute core of the risk inherent in centralized custody. I mean, when you use an exchange like Thodex, you are essentially placing bank-like trust in an totally unregulated entity. Özer's flight with that device just crystallized the critical vulnerability, centralization risk within so-called decentralized finance. And that massive failure immediately triggered a major, sweeping, and frankly, extraordinarily stringent regulatory response in Turkey.
A response specifically designed to eliminate this exact type of unilateral theft.
Exactly. It was a direct reaction.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because
Okay.
to really understand the massive shockwave the collapse sent, we have to understand the speed and really the brazenness of Özer's ascent.
Oh, right. And here's where it gets really interesting, particularly how rapidly he capitalized on the economic desperation of the entire country.
So let's start with the founder himself, Faruk Fatih Özer, born in 1993 or 94. And his background is, I guess, remarkable only in how modest it is.
That's a good way to put it.
He famously dropped out of high school before founding Thodex in Istanbul back in 2017. He was definitely not a product of the traditional financial establishment.
Not at all. He was the ultimate outsider success story, at least, at first. The story that's often cited is that he launched the company with a small, almost paltry initial investment of only 40,000 Turkish lira.
And what was that in US dollars at the time?
At that time, that was roughly 11,100 US dollars. That rapid scaling from such a modest seed investment just shows you how hungry the market was for an alternative.
And we really have to spend a moment on that market environment. Why Turkey? Why crypto?
Well, for years, the country had been experiencing extreme economic volatility, political turmoil, and most critically, the Turkish lira was undergoing significant and consistent depreciation.
So people's traditional savings were being eroded monthly, if not weekly.
Exactly. And that economic instability created a perfect storm for crypto adoption. The narrative surrounding Bitcoin and altcoins was hugely appealing. They offered a purported hedge against hyperinflation and currency depreciation.
So people weren't just speculating for fun. They were searching for a viable way to preserve their wealth outside of a national currency that was rapidly losing value.
That's it. And Thodex positioned itself right in the center of that lifeline narrative.
Well,
It capitalized on this sentiment and almost overnight became one of Turkey's largest exchanges.
it's incredible how fast it happened. By March 2021, Turkey wasn't just dabbling. It ranked among the top 5 nations globally for cryptocurrency adoption. The entire country had essentially pivoted toward a digital financial system.
And this elevated Özer from, a scrappy entrepreneur to a genuine digital celebrity, he mastered the optics of legitimacy.
Right. We see those photographs of him rubbing shoulders with extremely influential politicians, including Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, the foreign minister, and Süleyman Soylu, the minister of interior.
And that kind of political photo op is critical, right? It grants Thodex and Özer this veneer of institutional acceptance, of implied security, which is especially important in a market that's desperate for any kind of regulatory clarity.
It suggests, hey, if the cabinet ministers are meeting with him, this must be a stable, legitimate, and, safe place to park our money.
Exactly. But as we now know, that perceived stability was entirely illusory, and the actions leading up to the collapse suggested a very high degree of premeditation.
The boom period wasn't all legitimate growth then. It was punctuated by these massive, glaring red flags, specifically the way Thodex handled its final month of operation.
We have to discuss the infamous Dogecoin frenzy campaign.
Let's get into it.
This was a masterclass in aggressive, short-term user acquisition. It ran from March 15th to April 15th, 2021, and it seemed designed to pull in the maximum amount of liquidity and user numbers right before the intended exit.
And the mechanism was enticingly simple, right?
Yeah.
Every new signup was rewarded with 150 DOGE.
Simple and effective. The incentive worked brilliantly. It drove the exchange's daily trading volume to an unprecedented $1.37 billion.
Think about that escalation. From an $11,000 start to handling over $1 billion in trades per day just 4 years later.
But the truly alarming behavior emerged in the final week. Starting around April 14th, Thodex began selling Dogecoin at a deeply discounted fixed rate of 11 cents.
11 cents.
This was mathematically unsustainable and an immediate red flag for any seasoned trader. Why? Because just 2 days later, DOGE was trading for over 42 cents on every other major exchange worldwide.
So that's an artificial discount designed to lure in masses of new customers looking for an instant, 300% profit opportunity?
It was a classic honeypot maneuver. And here's the critical flaw that basically confirms the suspicion.
Okay.
During this entire fixed-rate promotional period leading right up to the trading halt, traders could buy crypto on Thodex. They could deposit massive amounts of Turkish lira to snatch up the cheap DOGE. But they were almost universally restricted from selling those assets back.
Or crucially,
transferring those assets off the platform to another exchange to realize their profit.
so they were creating a massive one-way funnel. Customers pour money in, convert it to heavily discounted crypto, but then that crypto is trapped inside the exchange.
That's right. The exchange is building a huge illiquid reserve of customer assets while simultaneously increasing its lira liquidity.
It's the signature move of an exit scam mechanism.
It is. They created a scenario where capital was maximized and outflows were minimized. It generated the maximum possible value held on the books, just as Özer was preparing his exit.
And the suspicion wasn't just felt by the traders, right?
What?
We know the government had voiced some concern.
Yes, the context of official skepticism is vital. Even before the collapse, the Turkish government, through figures like Mustafa Varank, the Minister of Industry and Technology, had publicly warned that cryptocurrency is ripe for fraud.
So they saw something coming.
They signaled a clear regulatory intent, noting that the sector was risky and would not be given free rein. The writing was on the wall. The infrastructure to enforce the warnings, however, was not yet fully operational.
Which leads us to the collapse itself. That pre-planned departure quickly turned into the real thing. On April 22, 2021, Thodex just abruptly ceased all trading operations. No meaningful warning.
None. All client funds, the cash, the cheap Dogecoin, everything were completely locked up. The platform essentially vanished into the digital ether.
And the initial official communication from Thodex was, what?
It was the classic delay tactic. They issued a brief statement on Twitter claiming the halt was necessary for a period of 4 to 5 days to finalize some unspecified outside investment.
Meant to calm investors down.
Right, but the accompanying actions were anything but reassuring, because at the exact same time, Özer deleted every one of his social media accounts. He cut off all customer support channels.
So the combination of a vague promise of investment and a sudden complete communication blackout that immediately triggered the alarm bells.
The community reaction was instantaneous panic and suspicion. A lawyer in Ankara immediately filed a legal complaint, stating publicly that this may well be a scam.
And the police confirmed it pretty quickly.
Very quickly. Police records moved swiftly to confirm the worst. The CEO, Faruk Fatih Özer, had left the country. and the timeline shows clear intent. His flight to Tirana, Albania, was booked and executed on April 20th, 2021.
2 full days before Thodex officially announced the temporary trading halt.
Which confirms that the closure wasn't a response to some sudden crisis. It was the final pre-staged act of a carefully orchestrated plan.
Wow. So once Özer's flight path was established, Turkish authorities launched a formal investigation on April 22nd.
And the international response followed rapidly. Interpol issued a red notice for Özer's provisional arrest. This notice essentially asks law enforcement agencies across the globe to treat him as a high-priority fugitive.
And back home, the domestic response was a massive show of force. The police launched mass arrests, sweeping up anyone associated with the exchange.
It was extraordinary. Police squads arrested 62 people, encompassing virtually every single Thodex employee. Pretty much. And critically, they arrested Özer's family. His older brother, Guvin, and his sister, Serap, were taken from their beds, charged with being complicit in the massive fraud.
That move was clearly designed to put immense pressure on the fugitive CEO.
No doubt.
So now we get to Özer's defense, which he relayed later during the extradition process. And it's dramatic and, frankly, highly theatrical.
That's putting it mildly. He rejected the initial fraud allegations, of course, claimed the platform was merely closed to investigate a cyberattack, but his story shifts dramatically once he's on the run.
His narrative was designed for maximum sympathy or, I don't know, maximum legal confusion.
Probably both. He claimed the media reports, the ones claiming the $2 billion theft and hundreds of thousands of victims, were deliberately inflated to get him killed in a high-crime country like Albania.
So his argument was that he was a young man alone with a rumored $2 billion in digital assets, and the sensationalism was a death sentence.
That was the claim. And the escape attempt itself is just pure fiction material. He testified that, fearing for his life from both local criminals and, possibly agents working against him, he underwent a drastic physical transformation.
This is the part about shaving his head.
Shaved his head, grew a long, heavy beard down to his clavicle, purchased a tent, and went camping alone on the southern Albanian coastline.
Just camping.
His goal, he claimed, was simply to ride out the nightmare of sensational reporting until the truth, his version of it, could eventually emerge.
It's a compelling human drama, but it really raises the question.
Yeah.
Was he actually in fear of his life, or was this an elaborate preemptive strategy to build a defense based on duress and mistaken identity?
Given the context of his flight immediately preceding the collapse, it's highly probable it was a dual strategy. Survive, yes, but also build a narrative of vulnerability for his eventual legal defense.
But the one thing that broke his self-imposed isolation was the arrest of his family.
That was the emotional trigger. Learning his brother Guvin and sister Serap were charged and facing the prospect of spending the rest of their lives in prison because of his actions, that apparently snapped him out of his coastal hiding place.
And he realized the severity had moved past financial crime and into, well, family devastation.
Right. And his idea, which was profoundly simple and, legally naive, was if every single claimant were paid back, maybe the crime, or at least the massive legal liability, would simply disappear.
And this leads us back to the most critical piece of evidence in this whole story, the cold wallet. Özer confirmed he still had the source of all the missing funds with him.
He claimed he had the Thodex cold wallet on his person, the legendary thumb drive. While he stated he couldn't recall the exact dollar amount in it, he admitted to holding the operational keys to the entirety of the exchange's cold storage.
So this confirms that the centralization vulnerability was real and it had been completely exploited.
Absolutely. The digital equivalent of a suitcase full of cash. And Özer used it, or at least he claimed to. While on the run, he initiated this process of partial repayment.
How significant was that effort? I mean, really?
Well, he claims to have paid approximately 185 million lira, which was roughly 10 million US dollars at the time, to over 1,000 claimants.
Which is,
yeah,
it's a lot of money, but it's small compared to the alleged $2 billion loss.
Exactly. It was perhaps meant to prove that he could pay back the funds and that he wasn't simply a thief, but someone who had been caught up in a complicated mess.
And what was the ultimate, almost mythological end to this key piece of evidence, the source of billions?
According to Özer's testimony, and this is a detail that deserves a cinematic moment, once the cold wallet had been sufficiently emptied for his partial repayments and his immediate expenses, He claims to have thrown the portable device containing the last access keys into the Ionian Sea.
Just threw it into the sea.
A definitive, dramatic, final act designed to ensure that no one could ever recover or audit the remaining digital trail.
Wow. But the fugitive's time camping and, making partial repayments was limited. The Interpol dragnet was persistent.
It was. Özer was eventually located and arrested in Albania on August 30, 2022, and extradited back to Turkey in April 2023.
And his return immediately forced the courts to grapple with the central piece of confusion surrounding the whole affair, the massive discrepancy in the actual scale of the fraud.
Right. The media reports and initial official accusations focused on defrauding 390,000 investors out of approximately $2 billion. That was the sensational headline number.
But the official legal proceedings told a slightly different story, at least when it came to the documentation.
Yes. While the number of affected users was nearly 400,000, prosecutors stated that only 2,027 official victims had filed claims and could be included in the indictment.
And this is a key insight into how large-scale fraud is prosecuted, right? The official damage number is often vastly lower than the sensational figure.
Often, yes. It's due to difficulties in proving ownership, filing claims, or simply investors who don't come forward for whatever reason.
And Özer, naturally, leaned heavily on this difference during his defense.
Absolutely. He argued that the indictment estimated the total damages closer to $43 million, which is a massive figure, of course, but a far cry from the $2 billion he was being sensationalized as having fled with.
That variance is crucial. It shows how the initial media frenzy established a public perception that was much larger than the legal reality the prosecution could actually prove in court.
Exactly. But even using the lower figure, the crime was colossal.
And regardless of whether the total was 43 million or 2 billion, the judicial response was swift, brutal, and historically significant.
In September 2023, Özer was sentenced in an Istanbul court. He was found guilty of multiple severe charges, including establishing a criminal organization, fraud through information systems, and money laundering.
And the sentence, as we mentioned at the top, is what just stunned the global financial and legal community.
It was almost unbelievable. Faruk Fatih Özer was handed an unprecedented sentence of 11,196 years in prison.
11,196 years. That number is just staggering. It's clearly a sentence designed not for imprisonment length, since no human can serve it, but as a form of theatrical deterrence, a cultural statement about the unforgivable nature of this betrayal of public trust.
That is precisely the legal interpretation. It's calculated based on applying specific maximum sentences for each proven victim or count of fraud. In Turkey, such calculations lead to these astronomical figures.
And it ensures that any possibility of parole, amnesty, or early release is mathematically zero.
It's a statement that this type of financial crime is viewed as one of the gravest possible offenses.
But the court's decision was not confined to Faruk Fatih Özer. His family was involved too.
No. In a move that underscored the severity and the zero-tolerance policy, his older brother Guven and his sister Serap, the two individuals Özer claimed he tried to protect with his repayment scheme, they were also issued the exact same 11,196-year sentences.
The exact same sentence.
The court treated them as fully complicit partners in the operation.
And beyond the prison time, Özer faced significant financial penalties, didn't he?
He did. He was fined an additional 135 million Turkish liras, which was approximately $5 million at the time. The financial and personal ruin was complete.
It's one of the longest sentences ever handed down globally, a monumental marker of the consequences of this kind of fraud.
It is. But we have to conclude this part of the narrative with the final tragic detail of Özer's life.
Right. Despite the astronomical length of the sentence, he served less than 2 years of it.
That's right. He was found dead in Tekirdağ F-type high-security closed penitentiary on November 1st, 2025. It was officially reported as a suicide by hanging.
A bleak end to a story that began with such explosive celebrity and ended with complete devastation for him and his family. The immense pressure of it all, the investigation, the global manhunt, the certainty of spending a literal lifetime in prison, it clearly took a final, devastating toll.
And while the legal saga of Faruk Fatih Özer ended in tragedy, his actions proved to be the pivotal catalyst for a fundamental restructuring of how crypto exchanges operate in Turkey.
The Thodex collapse forced the government to act
Decisively. It drove stringent regulations specifically designed to prevent this exact scenario, the unilateral, devastating theft of customer assets.
So this single case, the 27-year-old high school dropout fleeing with a rumored thumb drive of billions,
Mm-hmm.
was explicitly cited as the primary driver for a completely new regulatory framework.
Absolutely. Official documents, including reports from the Investor Protection Workshop, explicitly cited this high-profile fraud as the factor necessitating immediate and stronger oversight. The government recognized that investor confidence was utterly shattered.
They determined to impose rules that would restore structural integrity to the whole sector.
That's right.
So let's dive into the specifics of these anti-Urza requirements. How did the government use regulation to directly attack the centralization and custody risks that Urza exploited?
Okay, so first, they imposed stringent licensing requirements on crypto asset service providers, or CASPs. These platforms must now be established as joint stock companies with registered shares issued against cash payment. They have to maintain transparent shareholding structures.
So that move forces corporate accountability and makes it harder for a single unaccountable founder to secretly control the whole enterprise.
Exactly. And they must be licensed by the Capital Markets Board, the CMB.
It sounds like they're elevating these CASPs to the level of traditional, highly audited financial institutions.
That's the clear intent, imposing bank-like security requirements without offering bank-like guarantees. But the most significant change concerns client asset custody. It targets the commingling of funds that defined the Thodex failure.
So how is customer cash protected now?
Client cash funds must now be kept in separate accounts, opened in regulated banks. And crucially, these accounts must be entirely outside the platform's direct operational control.
So under the old Thodex model, Özer likely treated customer cash deposits as, what, operational float, accessible for business expenses or
Personal use. The new regulation mandates segregation. It makes it impossible for the CASP to use customer money for day-to-day operations or personal enrichment.
Okay, that addresses the Turkish lira. But what about the crypto assets themselves? The digital billions Özer allegedly put on that flash drive, that's the core vulnerability.
And this is where the rules become uncompromising. If platforms store client crypto assets, those assets must be segregated from the provider's own corporate assets. In the event of bankruptcy, seizure, or collapse, the client assets must remain untouched and recoverable.
And the custody services have to be provided by authorized banks or specialized institutions.
Regulated institutions, yes. Removing the asset control from the trading platform itself.
So how do they physically prevent a single individual, even a CEO, from just grabbing the private keys and walking out the door like Özer was accused of doing?
They codified cold wallet security definitions that demand redundancy and physical isolation. They make unilateral theft virtually impossible. The keys for cold wallets must now be protected by comprehensive physical, administrative, and technical information security controls. And here's the technical detail that directly addresses the thumb drive scenario.
This is the key part.
Critical transactions requiring authorized personnel intervention must take place in offline environments isolated from the internet by physical or technical air gaps.
Can you unpack that term air gap for our listener? Why is that detail so powerful?
An air gap means that the systems managing the final signing of a cold wallet transaction are physically or technically isolated. They are not connected to the internet or any internal network in any way.
So to move the assets,
You need multiple authorized personnel present in a physically secure room, manually verifying the transaction on a system that is fundamentally cut off from remote access or unilateral control. It is designed to replace the vulnerability of a single portable flash drive with a high-security, multi-signature, and physically audited protocol.
wow. Okay, so beyond fixing custody flaws, Turkey undertook a radical legal transformation in how it defines the risk associated with these exchanges.
They did. The 2024 Capital Markets Act introduced strict liability for CISPs. It fundamentally shifted the legal burden of loss.
What does strict liability mean in this context? Why is that such a massive leap?
Strict liability means fault does not need to be proven for compensation to be due. If a loss occurs, the CASP is liable regardless of whether the management acted responsibly or carelessly.
So it doesn't matter if they tried their best.
Exactly. This standard is so high that any contractual terms the CSP tries to include, in their terms of service, limiting or excluding their liability for system failure, those are rendered absolutely null and void by the law. They cannot disclaim responsibility.
This is a huge change from the caveat emptor or buyer beware ethos that characterized so many early crypto exchanges.
Oh, absolutely. Furthermore, the legislation invokes Article 71 of the Turkish Code of Obligations, which holds CASPs liable for crypto asset losses from cyberattacks, security breaches, or personnel behavior. And the critical implication here is the legal classification they use to justify this.
What's that?
The operation of these digital systems is now classified as abnormally dangerous activities.
Abnormally dangerous activities. That's extreme. What other types of operations are typically classified this way in legal codes?
Historically, this classification is reserved for things like storing highly explosive materials, handling nuclear waste, operating high-tension power lines, activities that carry an inherent unavoidable risk of catastrophic damage, regardless of precautions.
So by classifying crypto exchanges alongside those activities, the Turkish government is explicitly stating that running a CASP is inherently dangerous to the public.
And therefore, the operator bears full, strict responsibility for any failure.
The implication for the individuals running these exchanges must be terrifying. Did they introduce personal financial liability to target the founders and directors directly?
They absolutely did. This is another direct response to the Özer case. If the CASP entity cannot compensate losses due to illegal activities or failure to fulfill its obligations, individual members of a CASP, so directors and shareholders holding 10% or more, can be held personally liable for damages attributed to their fault.
Which means a director can't simply hide behind the corporate veil of a failed company. Their personal wealth is at stake.
Their own money.
Right. Okay, so the regulations covered custody, security, corporate, and personal liability. They also had to address the deceptive, hyper-aggressive marketing that fueled the boom, like that Dogecoin frenzy.
Yes. They cracked down heavily on the deceptive narratives. CASPs are now strictly banned from marketing practices that promise fixed returns or falsely imply that trades are executed under the guarantee of public authorities.
They're essentially regulating the language of speculative mania.
Precisely. They are forced to eliminate any message promising guaranteed easy profit. And transparency is now mandatory. CASPs are obliged to present every customer with a clear, explicit risk statement form before any trading begins.
And this form has to list all the core risks of the asset class.
Every single one.
What are the key disclosures they are forced to make?
The required disclosure explicitly states that crypto assets are highly volatile, that transfers may not be reversible, and this is the most important legal admission, that crypto assets are not subject to investor compensation provisions set down in Article 82 of the Capital Markets Law.
So that is the ultimate legal paradox they created. They impose the security standards of a bank, they classify the operations as abnormally dangerous, but they legally confirm to the customer that if those security standards fail, there is still no FDIC equivalent. There's no insurance safety net to protect their investment.
And that's the critical balance point. The government is forcing platforms to be safer, but it is also ensuring that the self-directed investor understands, legally and unequivocally, that the ultimate risk of loss remains entirely theirs.
The freedom from traditional banks comes with a specific, legally mandated acknowledgement of risk.
Exactly.
So this deep dive has explored an astonishing saga. The high school dropout, Faruk Fatih Özer, who in his late 20s rode an economic crisis to celebrity, allegedly emptied his exchange onto a portable thumb drive, fled the country only to be hunted down, sentenced to an impossible 11,196 years alongside his siblings, and ultimately die in custody.
The Thodex case is a profoundly tragic but ultimately informative global landmark. I mean, Özer's alleged method of theft taking the cold wallet key on a single device did more to highlight the catastrophic vulnerability of centralized custody than years of white papers ever could.
It's a very visceral example.
It is. And the resulting Turkish legislation, which imposes bank-like strict liability, air-gapped security, personal financial liability, it just demonstrates the forceful measure governments will take when public trust is entirely obliterated by catastrophic failure.
So what does this all mean for you, the investor, looking at the global crypto market today?
I think in the wake of massive crypto frauds across the globe, the regulatory hammer is now falling everywhere. And it's often demanding that centralized exchanges operate with the security and accountability of traditional financial institutions. Turkey's framework is radical because it classifies these digital operations as abnormally dangerous.
Yet, while demanding extreme security, the framework simultaneously forces the exchange to explicitly disclose that there is zero investor compensation if the system still fails.
And that forces a difficult choice for you, the self-directed investor. Given the high legal acknowledgement that your losses are fully your own, regardless of the scale of the fraud you fall victim to, how much convenience should you trade for the ultimate safety of self-custody?
The regulatory response secures the exchange.
but it doesn't secure you. And that balance remains the central defining challenge of the entire crypto space.